Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi, Shvi'is, Pei Gimel, Halacha Beis, and Halacha Gimel. We're going to learn today Daf Chaf Aleph. We left off on Daf Chaf Aleph, Amud Aleph, Mamish, on the top of the Amud. We're dedicating today's class, Le'ilu Nishmas, Moshe Baruch Ben Yaakov, Olav Hashalom, and that is our Gabai's father. Today is his 8th yahrzeit. So we left off by giving two different understandings in the opinion of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who says that you cannot add or bring out fertilizer unless you have the total of the minimum, perhaps also the maximum, of the 10 mashpelos. So one understanding of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was that even if you had a small pile that was made for storage pre-shvi'is, and all you want to do is not begin a new pile, but add to that pile, even that may not be done. Now, that's a very strong stringency. Why is that a big chumrah? Because if you're not even starting a pile independent of your kavanah, which it's not to fertilize, aside of that, you're not fertilizing because you're placing a basket of zevel on top of zevel that's already there. That's basically not doing anything as far as fertilizing is concerned. Nevertheless, the reason why Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah will hold that even that is not permitted, the only thing you are allowed to do is, like we explained yesterday, if, for example, pre-shvi'is, you had a pile of 3 mashpelos, then you can only bring out 7, not less than 7. So when you put it down, there's already the pile of 10. Because the whole issue is marasayin, and the only way you address the marasayin is when you have this very large pile. It's obvious it's not to fertilize, it's only for storage. That was one understanding. The other understanding of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is that if there was already something stored there pre-shvi'is, then you are allowed to bring out a little bit at a time. And since your goal, your kavanah is not to fertilize, de facto, you're not fertilizing. There's already fertilizer there. You are planning to get to 10 mashpelos. You're good. When does Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah say you may not do it? Is if you are starting a new pile. That if you're starting, if there was nothing there, then you have to place right away 10. And the reason for that is much more serious, because if you're not going to hit 10, then you fertilized. If you only ended up with your 1 mashpel, then you're fertilizing. Even if you brought out 5 at a time, you put it down on the ground. That is why he says it's usher. But he'll also agree that if there was already something there pre-shvi'is, you will be allowed to add to it, even though you're not adding to 10 right away, as long as your goal is to hit the 10. These were the two interpretations of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and the Gemara today is going to begin by making really a fascinating correlation, a fascinating link between the opening Mishnah in Moed Katan. From the many, it's a big Mishnah, but the Mishnah also speaks out the Shita of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah that says, and I'll quote the words that we have there in Moed Katan, Ein oisen esho adama batchila, esho ama batchila b'moed u'b'shvi'is. We're speaking about someone digging an irrigation canal either on Chol Hamoed or on Shvi'is, and Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah holds that you may not do it, not Chol Hamoed, not Shvi'is. The Chachamim hold that you are allowed to do it in Shvi'is. In other words, everyone agrees you may not do it on Chol Hamoed. Now, we're going to have two understandings. Bechumra, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, and as we will see, those two explanations in Moed Katan, mamish follow the two explanations that we have over here. And in addition, God willing, we're going to open up a Moed Katan and Bavli, and we're going to see on Daf Daled Amud Beis, we're going to learn a Tosfos that's going to address a little bit the psikresha issue that we mentioned already a few times, that there is a psikresha issue. That means when you bring out 10 at a time, even though you're bringing out 10 mashpelos, even though your kavanah is only for storage, but you're putting it on the ground, it does de facto fertilize the ground underneath it. What do we do with that? Right? That we don't say it's a davar she'ein eschaven. So we're going to learn a Tosfos about it, and that will more or less be the sugya about about what we are learning about the mashpelos. I just want to add one thing, that at the end of the Gemara, before Halacha Gimel, Kevan asked yesterday, what can you put, let's say, today, these tarps, can you put a tarp on the ground and put fertilizer, even if you don't have that quantity of 10 mashpelos? And we will clearly see that, yes, you could. You're going to see that clear in today's Gemara. And the new Mishnah, Halacha Gimel, will go me'inyan le'inyan, same topic of the Isur midrabanan of fertilizing a field. We're going to be speaking about penning animals in your property. In other words, actually building a corral and having animals go in it. And what's the issue with that? The issue with that is that when animals are stationary in one general location, with time, they're going to also end up fertilizing that part of the field. And here again, everything will have to do with kavana. If the reason why you are petting the animals in the corral is because you want that area to get fertilized, then you're not allowed to do it on Shvius. But if you have other reasons why, you want to keep the animals gathered, not scattered all over the place, so we will see in certain scenarios, certain restrictions in which you will be allowed to do it.
Is there a timeline for fertilization? It doesn't happen immediately. It takes some time.
We're going to have all of that in the Mishnah, and then in the Gemara, we're going to have about what materials can be used to make such a pen. That will be the new topic of Halacha Gimel. So without any further ado, Chavre, as we just reviewed the two Shitas Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah here in Shvius, either Marasayan or you're actually fertilizing. So now Zakti Gemara, this is Mamish Gavaldik, that Rabbi Yosi, Bei Rabbi Bun Amar, that Elaine Shmu Asa Dahacha, these these two interpretations in the understanding Bishitas Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, why he prohibits bringing out anything other than a full 10, or having right away 10 and not a little bit at the time. And like we mentioned, it's either just a Marasayan issue or it's much worse, because if you're beginning from 0 and if you're not putting 10 at a time, then you're fertilizing. And again, we have to admit that even when you put down 10 mashpelos on the ground, you are fertilizing. That's the issue with psikresha. But at least from the outset, it's clear that that's not your kavanah. That for sure there is. In addition, that you're not fertilizing it kedarkoi. There's a shinoi. That's not the way you fertilize. Okay, so these two interpretations, now the Gra adds these words, and it flows better. That's his girsa, that the two interpretations over there is ke'ilein shmuasa dahasam. It will be mamish similar than to the two interpretations. Also, Bishitas Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah in the beginning of a Moed Katan, the Tanin, and we learned over there. If you have a Gemara Mishnah, you'll see it's in the middle of the Mishnah. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Omer, Mishnah, the beginning, and the Bavli, the Beis Amud Aleph. Ein oisen es ha'ama batchila b'moed b'shvius. We're speaking about digging a new irrigation canal that was used to help the waters go from one place to the other. You may not do it on Cholamayit, you may not do it on Shvi'is. Now, the reason why you may not do it on Cholamayit, we just learned about this a few days ago, that even though when there is a Dover Ha'aved, that's the first of the 5 Heterim, if you're not going to do that type of malacha, there's going to be a irrevocable loss. Okay, even when there is a real loss, anything, and I'm using the words of Chazal, that demand a tircha yisera, excessive exertion, may not be done. Now, where do you draw the line? I don't know. But when you learn enough, you see the line. Digging an irrigation canal, I'm not saying nowadays, I'm speaking about in the times of Chazal. There was no tractors, there was no machines. Digging earth, we know that is a big avoida. That may not, so that's simple. And everyone agrees to that. If it's cold, can you shut off the fan? All the way in the bottom on the right, there's a fan and it goes, you have to shut it. You'll see. It's now on, you put it on something else. Now, the chiddush of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is that not only may you not do it betchila, you can't, if it's there and you're fixing it, it's much less work. But to begin and making such a canal, not only may you not do it on Cholamoid, you also may not do it on Shvi'is. That is Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Again, for the record, The Chachamim hold that you are allowed to do it on Shvis. So that's the machlokes. And on that, we have over there two different reasons, and they mamish fit the two reasons over here. B'shitas Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. So Amar Rabbi Ze'era. Reason number one, why can you not dig it on Shvi'is? What's wrong with it? Because when you dig a canal, you put the earth on the banks of the canal, on the sides of the canal. And what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that is that the earth that you put on the sides is very soft. It's very loose. And loose soil is exactly the type of soil that you need when you want to plant. And look inside the maraful, the 7 lines from the top of the Amid. A canal, which is either going around in a field or it's going from one field to the next field. All the irrigation systems that they use to get water where water needs to go in the field. You can't make a new one or and ubashvis. Like we just spoke out Tirchi Yisera. Like we get that's what we're learning over here. And he's quoting Rabbi Ze'era, which is the first reason, because you are preparing the sides of the bank, of the canal, which has on it now a heap of loose earth. The earth that you were throwing on its wings, which means on its banks, on its sides, it's loose. It's easy. It's suitable for planting. And therefore, not marasayin. It's like here. It's like the second understanding. You're putting you're fertilizing. It's the pre-planting. You can say it's harisha. You're doing an act which is in itself prohibited. Now I know that's not your intent. We know that. Chachamim will say it's mutter, but this is what you're doing. What's the second reason we learned in Moed Katan? Rabbi Yirmiyah, and this is the same name we had yesterday in the name of Rabbi Bun Bar Chia, in the name of Rabbi Bar Mamo. He doesn't say that because you're mamish being machshir tzedel l'sriyam. The issue is marasayin, the mamish gavaldik, and that's the same member that explained the shita over here. That even if you already had some manure heaped on your field prior to Shvi'is, even there, says Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, you can only bring out more on Shvi'is if you're right away hitting the 10. Because only when the pile is 10 high, 10 mashpelois, there do you circumvent marasayin. Prior to it being 10, marasayin. That was Gavalt. And in marasayin, because you're not fertilizing at all. Mamish, like over there. B'pnei marasayin. Keep your finger in the Gemara. Look inside the maraful, the 16 lines from the top. B'pnei marasayin. The nira, because it looks like it looks like you're mamish hoeing, you're digging, you're plowing on shviz. No, we're going back over there, that when you're digging an irrigation canal, you're digging into the ground. Now, you're not digging into the ground to sow. We know that. But that's what it looks like. That's what it looks like. It's a maras ayin issue. Now, before we go on, so says the Gemara, here is the connection. Have a boy meimar man the Amar Tamon. The one that says over there, which is Rabbi Yirmiyah in the name of Rabbi Bun Bar Chia, in the name of Rabbi Bar Mamo, that the issue of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah in Moed Katan, digging a new irrigation canal on Shvis, which he says it's prohibited, is because of Maris Ha'ayin. That will fit the interpretation here in Shvis, v'hach mepnei Maris Ha'ayin. And therefore, even if you already had manure on the ground before Shvi'is, when you add to it, you have to add right away to 10. And if you don't add to 10, you're not fertilizing, but there's a marasayin issue. However, man, the Amar, that when does Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, why is he machmer? And marasayin won't be enough to be machmer. The pnei shehu machsher as sidodel lizriya, because over there it's mamish, the earth on the sides are more fit for planting. How would you apply it over here? Meaning, if Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah over here in Shvi'is would be speaking about a case where there was already manure on the field pre-shvi'is. If that would be the case of the Mishnah here, then you're not fertilizing. You're not doing anything wrong. It wouldn't fit. Indeed. And that is why, as we learned yesterday, the other approach in our Mishnah is that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah will allow you, if you already had some manure on the ground pre-shvi'is, to add to it. He will allow you. Because when you add manure to manure, you're not fertilizing. It's already fertilized. That's why Muzman Zagin, like we learned yesterday, no, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is only speaking about a scenario where you had nothing on your field pre-shvi'is. And you're putting it on the ground. Now, that's a problem because you are de facto fertilizing. Elamad, the Chachamim said that since that's not your kavanah, and because you're going to make a pile of 10, they allow you to do it. That's something else. That's something else. But that's the whole point. He was afraid that if you don't right away get 10, if you're not going to hit the 10, if you're only going to have the little amount that you're bringing out right now, and you're de facto, that is why it's usher. No, is marasayin enough for an isur? Machloikis over there, machloikis over here. Now, before we go on, I'm opening up a moed katan bavli, and this sug is discussed on daf daled amid beis. These two understandings over there. One opinion says mipnei shemachsher agapeha lizriya. That's the nusach over there. We learned that nusach in the marafulda. So it's not marasayin. When you throw earth on the sides, that earth is fit for planting. So he says, and v'nira kecharisha mamish, it's mamish charisha, or it looks like charisha. Shesevurim haroyin shalakach nischavin, u'inami chashiv lei avodas karka mamish. You're working the ground. You're working the ground. You did an act of charisha over there in Moed Katan. Aflagav she'enim eschaven lekach. So Tosfos says, no, that's not a teretz because it's a psikration. Miu malachi. Rab Shimon says, Dovashem eschaven muter. Says Tosfos, Moed Rab Shimon bepsikration v'loyamus. So that's the big kasha we always have the whole time. So how do you address it over here? It's psikration. So says Tosfos that those who disagree with him hold the al yedei shinoi avid lei lav malachi. When you do a shinoi, there's no issue of psikration. It's a big thing. And just to speak it out a little bit more detail, guys, remember the rule. People that are not learned should not even know this rule because they're going to be machalol, Shabbos, and Yom Tov. Anything you do with the shinoi, you downgrade the isur. If I do any of the malachas on Shabbos with the shinoi, it goes from being asr midaraisa to asr midarabanan. If a person does something that's asr midarabanan b'shinoi, it goes to being mutter. You have to be careful because people are going to find a tenem to do whatever you want. So let's come back to our case of fertile.
I heard you're always supposed to turn off the light on Shabbos with your left hand, and then it's okay.
Here you go.
Yep.
In other words, what do people say? People say is that the electricity. I just want to throw out something over here. The consensus today is still that the old style light bulbs is asur d'oraisa. I know we're going to have some pushback on this.
Incandescent light bulbs, they call them. Incandescent.
I have to be careful not to say this in public, but not there's a lot of most electronics, the walkie-talkies that they use here for the security, opening it and closing it is asur midrabanan. That's the consensus. And when something is asur midrabanan and you do it with a shinoi, it's theoretically mutter. But we don't do that. But for security reasons, that's the thing. You have to have always something else. We have to be careful. But coming back over here, when you do something with the shinoi, it only went down to an isur derabanan. And the big question is, do we say psik reisha by an isur derabanan? You should know this goes all the way in halacha. There's a debate about it. And that's the way this topic is addressed. It's just much easier to address it. In Moed Katan, the isur is a isur d'oraisa. When we're speaking about sowing on Shvi'is is an isur d'oraisa. Our topic here is about fertilizing. Fertilizing to begin with is only an isur derabanan. And therefore, the whole psik reisha, again, is already, according to some opinions, a non-issue. And even if it is an issue, then we have a double derabanan, because not only is fertilizing in itself only asr midarabanan, when you do it with the shinoi means when you fertilize the field, you do it one way, and when you store manure in the field, you do it in another way. So you're not fertilizing it in the normal way. All of this is how we address the psik reisha issue. Okay.
We said yesterday that for manure you do it solid magrefa. It's like a whole different way of moving it. No,
That's right. That's right. That's also from Marasayan that people even then see when you are taking it out. They can actually see that's addressing the chachamim who hold you can take it out a little bit at a time. You don't have 10. People already see from the beginning that you're not doing it for fertilizer. Okay, anyways, coming now, we're not done with Moed Katan. So once we made this correlation, what will be the nafkamina over there in Moed Katan between the two understandings, Bishitas Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, my nafak mi beinayim, but the bottom line is you cannot dig an irrigation canal, a new one, on Shvi'is. There is an nafkamina, whether the issue is because you're being machshir tzidodea, or whether the issue is marasayin. What happens if chafar lasa is ama shel binyan? What happens if you're digging in the ground not to make an irrigation canal, but you are digging to make a building? What's an afkamina? The Gemara will say beautifully. The Gemara now this is not a kasha. This is explaining the nafkamina. That the one who says that the only reason why Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah disallows you to dig an irrigation canal, a new one, on Shavuos, is because of Marasayin. Marasayin won't make a difference. Won't make a difference whether you're digging for a canal, whether you're digging for a building. Also, it will be usher because of Marasayin. What's the Marasayin? It looks like you're hoeing the ground on Shvi'is. People don't work the ground on Shvi'is. Now, the hoeing that you're not allowed to do is for planting. I know you're building. Canal is building. The building you can build on Shvi'is. You can build on Shvi'is, but you're digging in the ground. That's a problem. However, Manda Amar Tamam Marasayin is not enough. You have to do something that's actually part of pre-planting, making the earth soft for planting. That is not shaykh by building. When you are digging a hole in the ground to make a foundation to a building, I'm going to say two things for that. Number one, when people build, I see this today. When you dig out the earth, the amount of earth that you dig for a building is much more than the amount of earth you dig when you make an irrigation canal. It's called an amma, probably because it only went an amma. I'm not minimizing it. I'm 1.5 feet in the ground. When you build a building, you go way more than 1.5 feet. And therefore, when you build an irrigation canal, what do you do with the earth? You put it on the side. The earth stays there. When people build, or when people dig for a building, they take the earth away. The earth that is now soft won't even be there. You right away put it in the back of a pickup truck over here, of these big garbage dumpsters, or you take the earth away. Or you make these huge piles and you press them down. And the area is not fit for planting. In other words, it's there's no planting over there. So therefore, according to that opinion, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah will say that on Shvi'is, there's no isur of malacha b'chlal. I'm allowed to work on. I just can't work the earth. If a person wants to build a building, then they can dig in the ground and they can make a hole in the ground. It's not even. There's no issue. If the issue would only be because of actual. Now, marasayin is there. Marasayin, because when someone is observing you digging a hole in the ground, they don't know what you're doing yet. Certainly not in the beginning. What's tustu?
The issue is, you care about people from
and Vlad is just reminding us that we only care about the locals. But if I have, I don't know that. Let me just, okay, I hear what you're saying. If I have my house and I want to build a back house, I have no back house. When I begin to start working the ground, you don't know whether I'm landscaping. You don't know whether I'm building a building. In the beginning. Okay, weiter. I want to add one final thing. Marasayin is always tricky. One thing, we're not allowed to make up Marasayins. And by Marasayin, you can argue, Ein lo davar soif. Ein lo davar, you can argue that. So, I'm just saying that in relation. So, Vlad says, the local people know what you're doing. Could be they do, could be they don't. It's not brought over here. Now, what about other solutions? The Mishnah gave you a solution of making, of an indentation of 3 tfachim, making a heap above the ground of 3 tfachim. Then even that, the Mishnah says, if you have a boulder, a stone, I'm going back to the tarp question. So Gemara says, Hakol moedim. How, even the most stringent, which is Rabbi ben Azariah. She'im hoyesham sid. The Mishnah only spoke about a boulder. Now the Gemara is going to add many other materials, lime. No one manures on top of lime, or tzeroidos, or little pebbles, or yavanim, or stones, or gispis. In all of these cases, that it's mutter. Mutter means even if you are only bringing out a small amount of manure, and you are beginning a new pile on Shvius, there is absolutely no issue. Just to make it clear, yes, if you have these blue, I don't know who mentioned me, the Gabbai, if you have this blue tarp, then yes, you are allowed to make heaps for storage, because you are manuring, nor is there marasayin. You'll see that the person.
I think lime and gypsum kills the ground. It doesn't actually let anything grow.
Very good. Vlad is explaining that these are materials, both the lime and the gypsum or the gypsum, that it stops. It's like plastic. It doesn't allow, so it's zichar, not fertilizer. Okay. And now we are moving on to the new Mishnah, and it's the same topic, but a different scenario. And the Isur here of the beginning of Me'emosai, there's an Isur midrabanan to fertilize your ground on Shviz. And as the Gemara will make it clear that this Mishnah is only speaking about in a scenario where a person wants to pen their animals in a corral, not for the sake of fertilizing that ground. Why do people put them in a pen? I'm not a farmer. I don't even understand. How can they not be in a corral? Why wouldn't the animals run away? I don't know how that works. You know, when they go out to graze, they're out in the open. But that's the story of Moshe Rabbeinu. One of the Shepselach got lost. It went on. It's like our kids here in the shul. You got to make sure they don't run out on the street. Even when there's you got to keep them safe. So here we're speaking about you're putting the animals in a pen on Shvis, not with the kavana of them fertilizing the area. But same thing, marasayin. We don't want for there to be an appearance that why are you putting the animals in this corral? Because you want the land to be fertilized. And the solution to the marasayin is basically that you will never be allowed to pen them in a way where you fertilize the whole field. You can only put them in a pen in a limited area in the field. And the Gemara will address that if your field to begin with has this size or less, you're going to have to make the pen even smaller. And from the fact that you won't be fertilizing the whole field, only a little part of it or a limited part of it, that addresses the marasayin. So two things are needed. Kavana to fertilize, then you can never put the animals in the corral so that area should get fertilized. If you don't have kavana to fertilize, then the size of the corral will be that which will address the maras ayin. So says the Mishnah, Hamadayer esodeyu, dira means to live there. Madayer is the word that's used when it comes to penning an animal in a corral. And not only are you allowed to bring them into a already built pen, but you are even allowed to build a pen. Guys, Shvi is a time in which there is no Isser to do malacha. On Yerushalmi and Shabbos, you can build. And we just mentioned you have to build it in a way, maybe with the earth, you have to address that earth issue. You can make an enclosure. The word in the Mishnah is sahar. I want you to know that the other versions have sachar. They are both, the word sachar or sad means a closed area, only up into a beis osayim. We kept on learning about a beis saw. Beis saw is 2,500 square amas. Beis osayim actually is the size of the Makim HaMikdash, 5,000 square amas, 5,000 square amas. And this is the word. The fact that you won't make a sahar or a sachar larger than that area, and that is only a little chelik of your field, it doesn't matter the percent, but that's the limit, that makes it evident for the marasayin that you're not doing it to fertilize. And again, just to repeat, if the kavan is to fertilize, it's going to be yasser. Clear. You're not doing it to fertilize. Marasayin, you limit. What's the limit? Beis osayim. Now, really, you can end up with more than a beis osayim. And here, Kevan will have some beautiful picture work to do. Because at one time, guys, you can only do beis osayim, 5,000 square amas. Let's say I have a field that has 1,000, and I am allowed, I don't need to limit myself to one area. I can double the beis osayim into 4 saw, not at the same time, only by leaving one wall, one side of the enclosure fixed, moving 3. So if you can look in the picture and you can put a base saw, if you see the picture on the left, so what you do is that the wall, which is in the center, you leave. You move the other 3 walls to the other side of the center wall. Top left picture. So what did you accomplish? The top left picture, not this one. There you have 4 saw. No, it's once you limit yourself to the base osayim, for whatever reason, again, if your reason is because you want to fertilize more, you're not allowed to do that, guys. That's the word. You can't do it l'shem. But for other reasons, you might want to do it in another location. You want to change the location of the pen, you can do that, but leave one of the walls up. You only get to move 3 of the walls. So it's going to be adjacent. You're going to have 2 saw and 2 saw. However, you have to leave the middle wall intact because you can only have one really. You can only have one enclosure. What did you benefit? For whatever your reason, that location wasn't so great. You ended up having the animals in a corral, not at the same time, of 4 besa. Nimsa medayir base arbas soin. These are the words of the Tanakama. So that's the picture on the top, not the one that Kevin is looking at. And the concept won't be debated. The leniency of the Rashbag is that he says, yeah, same thing. You have to leave one part of the first enclosure, but you don't have to leave against a wall. You only have to leave one post. So that's, go down, Keva, in the picture in the bottom. So if you take a look, now see the whole, very good. So there's a post in the middle, two base up. If you only leave, if you're looking at the top left picture, so you're looking, now we're moving on to Rashbag. If you leave it there. If you look at let's go the way he does it, that north is in the top, lahavdil, the way they're going to do it, right? So you have
every map that everyone uses.
Not every map that Goyim use. When you make a map, you put east on the top, with all due respect. So anyways, you have the middle, mamish the middle. Forget about directions. So if the post in the middle is left, then not at the same time. You get to have 2 Beisah top left, 2 Beisah either top right or bottom left. You get it, and you move around. So you end up getting a total of 8 Beisah. Same idea. The kavana can never be, why are you moving it around? There are other reasons why wherever you made an enclosure, it's not good for you. So you got to move it. But you can't move it because marasayan, you're fertilizing the field. As long as you keep it stuck to that one post, it addresses the marasayan. As long as the field is bigger than the 8 Beisah, that always has to be that way. You'll never be able, no matter what your kavana is, to end up fertilizing your whole field. That you can never do. You don't have to leave one side. No, only one post. And therefore, you'll have a greater leniency. You'll be allowed at the end, Beis Shmoinas Soyin, as we just explained. However, forget about that picture. Take that away. Now, however, even the Rashbag that's most lenient, if your whole field only had that you can never do the whole field. Why? Some of the field will have to be outside the enclosure. The Mishnah doesn't say how much a mashu is enough. Now there's a big machlokes tanoim. What happens if your whole field is 2 sa? Do we say that even there you have to be mishayin mixas? Or do we say, for the first 2 sa you're allowed to do it? 2 sa for a enclosure is very little. We made a cheshbon yesterday. We're talking about many animals. Okay, weiter. Now, yes.
You have a 500 base field. Do we do an enclosure on one side and an enclosure on another side?
No.
Just one enclosure.
Just one enclosure, but we're going to have soon in the Gemara. If the same balabas owns 2 fields, however you define 2 fields, one adjacent to the other, then there'll be more working on each one and v'chulei. even though it's problematic because he's the balabas. We're going to see a lot of limitations. Now, there's so many ways of learning the last din of the Mishnah. We're going to follow the first interpretation of the Pnei Moshe. Umoitzi min, again, either sahar or sachar, you can remove the manure that is now de facto in this enclosure, the noisen l'toich sodeyu, and you can place it anywhere in your field, only kiderech hamezablim, only conforming the rules that we learned, halacha aleph, halacha beis, which is after the zman of zibul, you can only make 3 piles of 10 mashpelois in a besa. Look inside the Pnei Moshe. That umoitzi min hasahar, he has the girsa with the hay, hach seifa. This final ending of the Mishnah says the Pnei Moshe in its first interpretation is milsa ba'an pei nafshehi. What are we saying? The komash malon. That the kshem shemoitzi hu mechad seidik ederach hamezablim kumoishe shnei bereishat pedek. We already learned the rules, the basic rules after the zman of oivdei avodah, and with the limitations of 3 of 10. Kach muter lohoitzi hazevel mitoich sahar hatzoin the noisen lotoich sodeu kederach hamezablim. What's the chiddush? I'll tell you the chiddush. Guys, we kept on mentioning, why do people want to move the manure in the field? So it's not only about storage, because it's not safe, it's not healthy to have in your house manure. There's a reason. Here, the manure is already in the field. Okay, it's in the area of the pen. So what? You understand? You would have thought that since it's already in the field, you can't move it at all. The mao the tema the chshemoitzi min hasahar v'hu makim she'ein makpidim lefanoi sazevel b'chol pam kederech shemefanim ha'chatzin. No one, people are not so concerned if there's manure out there in the field. Im kain, you might have thought nida kamoishes zemoitzi kedei lezabel sodeu. Here, there's an additional problem of marasayin. So that's why hilkach komash malon the af min hasar muter. As long as you are doing kederach hamezablim, that means, that's the word. If you're taking it out after the zman avodah, and you make 3 piles, and every pile has 10 mashpelois, there's no issue with marasai. That's the way we learn the Mishnah. Now let's go back into the Gemara. So first of all, we're gonna clarify that the whole making of a dira is only allowed when your kavanah is not l'shem zevel. How do we know that? Because we're going to have in the next Pedek Dalad Mishnah Beis, or if you want to go with the Dafim in Yerushalmi, Daf Chavav Amid Beis, the Mishnah is going to say something that appears to contradict our Mishnah. Asks the Gemara, come on, Tanin, and later we're going to learn Sada Sheniskatzva. If you have a person that against the law illegally, he cleared the thorns off the field on Shavuos, which he should not have done. That's an Isur Midrabanan. Do we penalize for such an Isur Midrabanan? The Mishnah says no. Tizara l'matzoi Shavuos. He is allowed to right away use his field Matzei Shavuos, benefiting from the fact that he cleared it from thorns on Yom Tov. There's 2 things over here. Number 1, it's an Isur only Midrabanan. That's key number 1. By an Isur D'oraisa, there's a Knas. And here's the second. Not only is it only an Isur D'Rabbanan, I'm going to use the words that we're going to have in Av Chavav. Clearing your field from thorns is not considered a significant act of its own. In contrast to Zibul, as we'll speak out. So over there, you're not allowed to do it, but if you did it post facto, you can use your field. The Mishnah says, but if nitaiva means you made it better. Means, we'll see over there. If you plowed your field, which you're not allowed to do, if you penned your field, the Mishnah applied, you're not allowed to do that. Not only did you violate an Isur, whether D'oraisa or Midrabanan, you got a Knas. And why is that considered a more significant act? Because the fertilizer improves the produce. Removing the thorns helps you plant better, gives you more land to plant in, but it's not so significant because it doesn't better. The removing of the thorns doesn't better the produce. Masha'enkein, the act of fertilizing, which is only a midrabanan, but since it's something that's called more significant because it actually improves that which, so we're not going to benefit, we're not going to allow you to benefit from the fact that you, bottom line is, what's the implication of the Mishnah? That you're not allowed to fertilize a field on Yom Tov. No, you're getting shvius, and you're getting penalized. So are you allowed, are you not allowed? And we're not going to learn pshat over there. They did it more than the base saw. No, we're not going to do it. We don't need to do that. So Amar Rabbi Yoina, And now you chap. Our Mishnah is speaking about someone that is not doing it l'shem fertilizing. He simply wants for his behemalach to be enclosed in the field. He doesn't want them to get lost at night. He wants to put them in a enclosure. That's the kavanah. The problem is only marasayin. So for that, says our Mishnah, oisasar beisosayim, masha'enkein over there, your kavanah is to fertilize. And coming back to the Tosfos that we learned, psikresha, so you have an isur derabanan, which is fertilizing, and it's a shino. You don't fertilize by putting animals. You fertilize by putting fertilizer. So that addresses the psikresha. That's why it's muted. The only problem is marasayin. Now let's go weiter. Says the Baraisa, Vlad, I think this is what you mentioned. First of all, bakoil oisim siharin, you can actually build it. You can even use flimsy material to make an enclosure. What's the chiddush? I'll tell you, David. You know what the chiddush is? When you make a flimsy material doesn't hold the animals in properly. So one might have thought, if it's flimsy, you're only doing it for zibul. Because, come on, the animals. No, we don't say that. Most animals, they stay in a flimsy enclosure. That's a chiddush. Even if you're making the enclosure b'mach lotzois, mats, or even if you're making it out of kash, even if you're making it out of avonim. I know last time we got stuck on it. Today people use 4 ropes. People use 4 ropes today when they make the wall. Yeah, because the rope has no depth. You have to have a total of 10 tefachim. The reason why in the Mishnah, the Lashon, just remember that we have 3. Yeah, because if your rope, if you have less than 3, then you have less than 9. Then you have to have 1 and a bit from the 3 ropes. The ropes that we use today, you won't give you the 1 tefach and a bit. When the Mishnah speaks about using 3, that's because every rope, has some depth. Ubilvad, shelo yehi bein sad l'sad, k'maloi sad. I just want to explain what that means. So this is very important. We're speaking, this one-liner, we're speaking about a person who owns 2 fields. 2 fields. So in one field, we had either the Chachamim, 4, not at the same time, or the Shvag, 2 and 2 are 4, or 8. 1, 2, 3, 4. But they have to be adjacent. What happens if I own 2 fields? So I would argue if I own 2 fields, every field can have either the Chachamim or the Shvag. No, since I'm the Balabas, they have to be within the area of this enclosure, which is either 8 L'Chachamim, 8, yeah, I'm saying good, 8, basis of 4, either 4 or 8. That means if I have 2 fields, it will allow me, Vlad, to put in each of my fields this one at a time, either 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3, 4. But there's another restriction. We want them to be close to each other because the farther apart they are, the more it looks like you're trying to be mezabel your whole field. That's the liner over here. They don't have to touch because it's 2 different fields, but the space in between this and that field has to be less than the max amount of the pen itself. And what could you do in there with final line? What can you do in there? Now, guys, the longer the animals stay in there, the more it's going to get fertilized. You would think, come on, you want to put it in there because you don't want them to run away at night. That you can do. What happens if you want to milk your animals? What happens if you want to share your animals? And you're saying, let me stay in the pen. So you are allowed to do it. We don't say, people are going to look that you're doing it, they should fertilize more. We don't say that. Once they're in there, and not only that, that you can bring the animals in and out. Moving animals around helps the animals relieve themselves more. It was all of these activities that somehow create more zibul is allowed because that's not your kavana, and you only made the sahad with the limit.